call the meeting to order. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I understand via text that the chair is 7 minutes from school. You can drive. So with that, we're going to start the approval of minutes of December 20th. Is that moved by Ms. Miller and seconded by Mr. Goodwin? Yes.
There is one edit
Yes.
on the third page, under curriculum. It says technology and increased bullying on social media.
Okay.
We should change that.
All right. Are there any others? There are no further errors or omissions. Call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? It's so passed. And we move right on to staff reports, junior high. Financial, oh, yes. We'll spare Mr. Sturgis.
My time's ticking. Okay, this one will be a quick one. Not much change from the previous month. We're headed in the right direction. Percentages look good as we move to the midpoint in the fiscal year. Our revenues and expenses are in line with about a 5% balance left over after encumbrances. So as we move into the new year, we're looking pretty good. And just the general things that we always watch, the special ed, oil, gas, utilities, those types of things.
Steve, the maintenance of equipment, junior high principal's office, you indicated that was a targeted account for review?
Yep, actually, if you look at your statement, you'll see that the maintenance of equipment in the junior high is about double what it normally is, and the reason for that is a renewal of the leases for copiers, which turned out to be double the cost.
The copy companies have jumped on every other bandwagon and used as an excuse to, it's just another item of inflation, increased costs, no matter how much we called around, and I did really push our technology director, who's visiting tonight, to call and look at many options, and the new leases are significantly higher. I think the high school's lease is at least 2 more years, so we're okay there. But that's queued up to the budget subcommittee because it'll be an item that we will see back up for next year.
Okay. All right, and I am aware that the esteemed chair has arrived.
You look good up there.
Looking very tanned. Mr. Valengrove?
How we doing? Apologies, the hike was terrible and I feel bad for whoever I was behind on this road.
You don't want that, you don't want that, that's your homework, you don't want that.
All right, that brings us to staff reports.
So, I'll jump in. Just have, not a lot since the last time we met, since with Christmas, with the winter break and only 2 weeks in between. Our ski club's up and running. We have up to 150 junior high students attending ski club this year. So it's awesome. We were able to get the transportation, which is honestly the biggest headache with field trips and everything right now, is just getting not the funding the transportation, just getting the actual transportation. So it's been awesome to have that many kids. We've had 2 event-free weekends so far, so that's good news. We did, right before the break, try to bring back kind of an honor roll recognition where we just recognize all students in the first quarter who received honors or high honors by having them come to the CAF and present them with certificates. I know some places just kind of throw them in a report card envelope, but we wanted to at least recognize them. And we also brought back putting the students' names in the local newspapers for those. So I know it was in the Sturbridge I'm gonna screw up the name, I know I'm mixing up all the Turley and publications. It was in the Sturbridge paper and it was in Spencer New Leader as well. I believe it may have been in the Quabog Current also. And so, then we also had the geography being the first week of January. I'd like to point out that Javen Mumford was the student in 7th grade who got only one question wrong on the entire day and ended up in 2nd place because his scores got wiped clean in the top 3, when they were down to the top 3. So he came back and dominated in 1 year too. An MCAS schedule is set for the spring. I included it in the packet. And so also just our winter athletics, we're having a good season so far. Our boys basketball team is currently undefeated, and our girls basketball team's lost 3 games. I don't know how they did in Grafton today, I haven't heard yet, but all the 3 games have a combined loss of a 5-point total. So very competitive, even in loss. So we're having a good run at it right now in the winter. So.
Questions for Mr. Sturgis? You have a request for us?
Yes, I just request, we have a bunch of stacks of books in this building. Teachers have been requesting over time to declare obsolete. Some are in a condition we can donate, they're just outdated textbooks, and a bunch of books in our English classes are very, very old to the point pages simply fall out when you open them. So and they've been replaced over time anyways with newer versions. So we'd like to request to declare those obsolete.
Entertain a motion to accept the recommendation of principal?
Assuming that there is Valentine's demand.
There is none. I can
Made by
assure you
Ms.
there.
Haggerty, Second by Ms. Cunningham. Discussion? All those in favor of the motion will say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it.
Thank you.
Mr. Wood?
I'm going to stick to the first page. You see the pictures of the kids doing the range of motion dance. That's a tradition that started when Miss Gonzalez was here years ago. And it started with the entire class. Now what the teachers have done is broken it down into groups of kids. And what the range of motion dance is, it's when the kids will go out to clinical, working with patients to go through exercises with them. So now they incorporate all of those things that they do when they do the range of motion with the patients into a dance to a seasonal tune. And it's pretty interesting. It does freak me out when they do backflips and stuff like that. But the kids work really, really hard. And you get to see how excited they are about it. And some kids are born dancers and other kids are born not to dance. But there's no judging. And the last part of this is, it's just a footnote at the bottom, the Cancer Kids First Club. They donated almost 900 books. The interesting thing about this cancer program, it was started by Mrs. Cartwright, who's one of the health careers teachers. It is the only chapter in Massachusetts that does this, and that's why they're connected to the Boston Hospital, not locally. And hopefully more schools will pick up on this because it obviously helps kids with cancer, and the school actually got really behind it, which was really cool.
Questions for Mr. Wood? Mr. Wood, the installation of kitchen equipment in Wales, is that the school or the senior center?
That would be the school. It's the wiring and things like that to get the infrastructure ready.
Ms. Joseph?
So we had a lot go on in December. We had a very robust December, as you know. As we turn the corner, we too have Ski Club taking place with almost 200 kids taking part in Ski Club. This week will be our 3rd week of Ski Club. Our performing arts folks, we had 4 students compete, 3 in instrumental and 1 in vocal at Central Mass districts. And we also have students competing at the All-State as well. That competition for Central Mass just took place this past weekend. And we can finally now out loud announce that our spring musical is Little Mermaid. So that has been revealed, and we went with a community family-based musical for participation this year. So we're very excited that that is underway. Our show choir season, our rehearsals and practices are underway, and we are very close to our kickoff of our competition season, which you'll hear about the next time we are together, I'm sure. we have our National Honor Society, who is preparing for, as schools match wits. On January 28th, they'll be traveling to Westfield State to compete against Munson. That will air on WGBH, and
NEPR,
Mhm.
first week of April.
Yep. So they're working on that and excited, getting ready for that. Our winter athletic teams are well underway. We are more than halfway through our season. As we actually begin to approach February and February break, we are finalizing and narrowing the field toward playoffs as the power rankings have started to come out in terms as we begin to look at playoffs. So that's exciting as well. We've had some very close losses for our boys and then some blowout wins as well. So it was very sad to us to lose to Oxford by 2 on the boys' side, but on the girls' side, they won by a landslide. So we're excited. They've had a lot of great competitions. Our fans have been more than happy to be back in, seeing our track especially and our swim, where they had more restrictions in the past as well. So we've had a lot going on. We prepare for MCAS. We are preparing for our program of studies and finalizing that and getting ready for not just the spring, but for next year as well. I also have one other element before you, and that is revisiting our proposal for a trip to the Mediterranean coast. And in the packet I gave the highlighted information, which was some of the responses to the inquiries that you had. One thing was that EF Tours would be willing to increase the ratio of 1 to 7 instead of 1 to 6. In speaking with chaperones, and they would give each student a $50 decrease on the trip. They also did extend that initial discount time period, which we learned tonight. That brings the total cost per student down to $36.19 from $37.79. The cost for the chaperones indicated that they would obviously be paying each of them for the $190 trip insurance, and the chaperones discussed contributing $150 each that would go toward student fees to help reduce the cost to our students. With regard to curriculum connections, there are listed curriculum connections there, which could include things such as monthly meetings with student travelers and or families to discuss curriculum topics. It gives more specific information about where they are going and what they are doing while they are there, as well as outlining the possibility for college credits with regard to work that they do. Also gave the information with regard to insurance trip cancellation that was inquired about. That's the $190. And then fundraising ideas listed there. One of the things which was discussed and is not listed here is the possibility for what's called a raffle calendar. So getting businesses to donate items on each day of a month. An item would be raffled off for those who have purchased the raffle tickets.
Is there a motion? Mr. Haggerty?
I'm gonna move we table it. Can I respond to my motion? Or
Can I get a second?
Second.
I appreciate the fact that they have come back with some additional information, but I'm concerned again by the price. I'm concerned over the fact that we're asking the students in a very difficult economic period to pay a substantial amount of money. The fundraising ideas, I would have been more receptive to, a plan of fundraising as opposed to ideas, because ideas don't necessarily have to happen. It's not connected with curriculum, as I indicated last time, and I have some real issues with the fact that it's not connected with the curriculum. If the teacher wanted to do this on her own without being school sponsored, she certainly can do that. But I don't see the value of sponsoring it as a school project at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Haggerty. Further discussion? Mrs. Fitzgerald?
I'm sorry I wasn't able to be here when this was presented in November, so I'm sorry if I'm asking you something that's already asked. But I know in the past, when we've considered trips of this sort, we're often given very detailed itineraries. Is that not possible with this type of trip? I mean, I know it's the Mediterranean coast, and there's one thing listed, the official residence of the Prince of Monaco. But it seems a little bit more generic than what we've seen in the past, and maybe that's not fair to pose to you because you weren't always here when those came before us.
The itinerary link is there, and I did copy that out for the last meeting.
Okay. And, you know, and I'm looking at it just in terms of a bylaw lens, and I know we have a bylaw that talks about overnight travel. I know what we're supposed to consider is, you know, whether it has significant tie to the curriculum, does not require students to do individual fundraising, and that every effort is made to give scholarships for those students who can't go. I noticed, you know, on here they talk about donation pages as the first listed potential fundraising opportunity, and if I'm reading that correctly, it reads like a GoFundMe page for each student essentially.
Not
Right.
far off, yeah, it's for them to share with their family members in that way, but yes.
Which, you know, while it, you know, we, in our policy, we say group fundraising activities are preferred. Students should not be assigned individual fundraising targets. So I don't know if the sanction of the school saying you each have a target to hit and here's your donation page, that's a little troubling to me versus we're gonna have a group fundraising activity. That, where everything gets spread out among students. Certainly, I know students' families and friends may contribute to their trip. But in this format, it looks like it's sanctioned by the school, this individual donation page.
For the donation pages, obviously, that's one thing that was suggested that can be done. That the fundraising ideas were things to organize bake sales, car wash, raffles with raffle tickets. That speaks to the calendar that I just spoke of, which I have a copy of something here for you if you wanted to see it, of a sample one, to look at what it looks like. And we also had that similar fundraiser for a sophomore class
And those,
last year. And then
those I get, yeah.
yeah, and then the Raise Right gift card fundraisers, also that's another partnership with businesses
Right.
as well with regard to
Yeah, and
the
those
gift
I'm
cards.
more familiar with. You know, I'm only asking, I've never seen the donation pages as part of a school trip before, so I'm just not familiar with that
Yeah.
format.
The fundraising ideas listed there, such as the bake sale, car sale, the raffles, that would help to lower the bottom line for everybody. That money would fund for that. And then anything remaining, that's where you look at the possibility of donation pages for families and students who would wish to do that or need that.
And then my last question is, you know, again, just looking through the school committee lens, you know, we're not allowed to review plans, school sanctioned trips unless they are school sanctioned, right? We can't review private trips or trips that are essentially private. I'm assuming if you're bringing this trip forward, you have looked at it and have sanctioned it as an educational opportunity.
Well, there are educational opportunities and there are links to college curriculum as well for students. While the staff sponsoring it is a member of the math department, not necessarily members that we've seen before, where we've seen foreign language, English people go before. But she is the one that brought it forward. She does have volunteers from the foreign language department who would be traveling with her, and the English department as well, who have experience in this and would be looking to link to their curriculum as well.
And I guess, and I'm asking a question, in our policy where we say the school committee will only review for approval school sanctioned trips. The school committee will not review or approve trips that are privately organized and run without school sanctioning.
Well, I think this is a request to sanction the trip.
Yeah.
But then we've reviewed, but our sanction then is the review. That language is a little unclear to me, and that's why I'm raising it.
By sanctioning it, we're allowing this to be covered by our insurance.
Exactly,
Right.
exactly.
Mrs. Custance?
I kind of on the same questions that you had. Also, where did we come up with the amount for $340 for the chaperones for the trip? That's it. And, again, the donation page, I agree, that shouldn't be even an option here. If they wanna do something on their own as families, that's fine, but I don't agree with that. And the, disadvantage, that hasn't been addressed in all this, and that was one of our concerns, I believe at our last meeting was, if we have a disadvantaged student, what's your population of students that you're gonna allow to go to this? And if they can't afford it, who's gonna help with the payments? That's one of my concerns with that one.
And so I know that you added on here that Southern New Hampshire University to develop an online course where they could earn 3 credits. Is that included in the price, or there would be an additional cost to get those 3 credits?
Be an additional. It's an additional cost.
Okay.
The cost there is for the travel only.
And do you know how much the 3 credits would cost?
It would be dependent upon what the rate is for that year, for 2024.
I was told $215 for that.
Total or per credit?
I think she said total.
It was total, but at the same time too, it could change.
And that's regardless of anyone's GPA, like you automatically anyone can get
Correct.
3 credits.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Mrs. Lamro King?
I'm just trying to understand how this is different from previous proposals that have come before and have been approved. I was told, I think in the last meeting, I said maybe like just before COVID or a couple of years before COVID, there was an international trip.
I think I was not sitting at this table then, so I might not be the best person to answer that. And that, you know, from at least the why we're at this table in terms of school sanctioned events, from my perspective as principal, to have a staff member advertise a trip and utilize access of students to go on this trip, to me was a potential conflict, which is why this was the right I saw this as the proper avenue to go through first, and then from there we would take direction if need be.
So a couple of the differences, I know in the past, we've exempted the coordinator from the conflict of interest rules, which permits the coordinator's cost to be covered. We've not generally exempted every chaperone, which is a fundamental difference here. This would effectively exempt every chaperone because the cost that they're paying is so significantly below the market value of the trip, so that's one. 2, generally it's directly connected to the curriculum of the respective staff member in their department. I think the last trip we approved prior to COVID was a music trip, and there were certain concerts and other requirements associated with that. So those are a couple of the differences to answer your question.
So I remember, I'm sorry to follow up, Mr. Wood and Ms. Boyd have been chaperones. You paid your own way and you weren't exempt, is that?
My wife was the chaperone, and
Okay.
they did not pay. Chaperones did not pay.
That wasn't for this school.
Correct.
Okay.
The ones I did for this school, before I was superintendent, I chaperoned and paid my way.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
But those were, there may be others. I do recall the South Dakota trip. I think we specifically laid out more than one chaperone, and we knew who they were when the presentation happened, and that was a more physically involved, clearly, you needed to have staff. I think they were almost all actually science department staff. So I do recall that one. I think, most of the others do have a more detailed itinerary than I've seen. And the cost, I think, is probably kind of freaking people out, though. I mean, again, it's been a long time since we've had it. COVID kind of turned things upside down, so I think the price point is significantly more than anything we've put out before.
Thank you.
Mrs. Barnacle?
I agree with everything so far, but particularly I agree with the curriculum connections. Most of the trips that I've ever been a part of, saying yay or nay to, have included a very much more detailed curriculum connection. And this seems very loose to me. Sentences like this would be a good opportunity to have students increase their educational focus during the travel, but it doesn't tell anything about how or how they were gonna use the trip or things that they, came across on the trip. So, I feel like this isn't detailed enough to be a trip that is supported by the school committee.
Thank you, Mrs. Barnacle. Mr. Goodwin?
Yeah, I guess so I guess I'm not as concerned about the curriculum as everybody else is. I think the trip like this, the value is that kids get to go experience, it's my glasses, everybody's blurry. But the experience of actually going on a trip, and I think the part I have concern about, and I think a lot of people have said it, is the kind of the equity of it. And how do we get kids, right? I think the value of us sponsoring something like this is, how do we make it so everybody has the opportunity to do it, not just the kids whose parents can write the check or have enough family around to kind of, support that. So I guess to me it's about the fundraising and how do we make it available to more people, because I think going on a trip like that, if you haven't been able to, is an experience that is to me worth more than whether or not you learned a little bit of Spanish or you went and learned some science in South Dakota. That experience is real life and much more valuable than whatever curriculum you get. But I think it's the equity and the fundraising and the cost that I'm concerned about, because it does feel like this is we should have some way as a school district that we say, okay, well, this is how you raise money in an equitable fashion, and this is how kids can, if you don't have money, this is how everybody earns their way onto the trip, whether it's they do public service or, we come up with some formula that works. I think it probably needs some thought by us to kind of come up with what is our policy around this and what kind of, how we want to go forward with trips, not just this one, but other ones in the future.
Mr. Goodwin, Mrs. Fitzgerald?
Deb, perhaps Ms. Boyd, you can correct my memory, but we did have a trip at one point that we couldn't sanction due to the lack of fundraising opportunity. In fact, that teacher took it outside of the school and said, that's fine, I just won't advertise it in the school, and it was sponsored. They still went on the trip, they still did it, but it didn't have the imprint of the school on it because we could not open it up to other students. And I'm a huge believer, as Ted said, I'm a huge believer in travel as education in and of itself. I certainly, I'm not trying to squash these efforts. I just think we do need to be aware of, at what point does a trip become a private trip? Simply under the umbrella of the school, whereby we're taking on that responsibility in terms of insurance and everything else, but it's essentially a private trip. And I just wanna make sure that we're preventing that as much as possible. I see here the way the chaperones work. For every 6 kids who join this trip, EF Tours pays for a chaperone. This is not that the money is built into the kids' fee, it's chaperones get free as they sign up more kids. So, when you start looking at it that way, it's just a little troubling in terms of whether we can really make this available to all students, or if there's going to be a limit. We only have 2 chaperones so we're only taking 12 kids, even though the limit is 42. So I'm not against the trip 100%. I just feel I don't have as much information as I would like to have before putting the print of the school and our insurance liability behind it.
Mr. Haggerty?
I move the question.
Motion to move the question. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. It's not debatable. This simply will end debate. So those in favor of moving the question, which will end debate, will say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Abstentions? Motion carries. We'll move to previous question. There'll be no further discussion on the motion. The question before you is a motion to table. Is it just a table, Bill?
Indefinitely.
I don't know that you made that in the motion.
No, I didn't.
Well,
I didn't. I just make the motion to table.
Are you looking for an amendment to that motion?
No.
Okay. Motion's been made to table. All those in favor will say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay.
Nay.
Motion carries. Who was the nay for the record? So at this point, with it being tabled, I'll evaluate if anything further comes forward. And if there's anything that's significantly different in terms of presentation, I'll place it on a future agenda, and if not, I won't.
Thank you.
for your time.
All right, then we'll move to committee reports. Mr. Rosen, good evening.
Good evening. So later this week we have finals for the high school, and while we had finals last year, this year would be the first year that we have it under a more normal guise. So for many, they're still getting used to having finals or getting reacclimated with that. So we have students are studying feverishly, and for others, this may be the first time they've opened up their binder since September. But everyone's excited for the start of a new semester and is looking back thoughtfully on their first semester classes as well. Winter sports are in full swing, and we have some extracurricular events coming up. Well, Ms. Joseph mentioned the academic quiz show that is coming up in a few weeks, but also our mock trial team has their first trial against Wachusett on the 24th. In that case is a wrongful death case. Following day there's a math meet, and this for the professional development day last week. We had a few student groups. We had both of which presented at the PD day in October, and they came back. So there was the student council workshop, Ask Me Anything, and that has teachers that will come in and review footage of students that are kind of sharing their reflections on what they would like teachers to know, maybe things that they are unaware of, or so it helps to open up a new lens and rapport. And then we had the social justice component through the Connections program, so they gave their exact same presentation as in October, and that we had a good showing for that. So we're hopeful for similar initiatives, whether they be through student council or for social justice, to kind of creep their way in more regularly as well. And student council is beginning to prepare for the spring dance in March. And also on the 27th, we'll be traveling for a unified bocce tournament in partnership with our school's Pathways program, and that is through the MASC. So we have a delegation going to that, and we're also preparing our fundraising for our polar plunge, which we'll do in March also with Special Olympics. And also our high school ski club has just started up as well, and that is going well. So I look forward to updating you once the new semester ensues. Thank you.
Have you put a price on my head yet? They usually put a price on the principal's head, how much it costs to get them in. I am there and willing.
There's some groups that would write some big checks. Your sweatshirt, is that in the school store or is that a club sweatshirt?
This was for the sophomore. Well, this was for the class fundraiser when I was a sophomore. So it already has gray hairs that are coming off of it. Yeah. So it's not from the school store, but it was from an outside provider that they did for the fundraiser.
Mr. Haggerty has expressed interest in purchasing a sweatshirt for all of us, so I want to give him some.
You don't want this one.
Ms. Lima, good evening.
Good evening. So as Mr. Wood mentioned, in Allied Health, they just finished their range of motion unit and those range of motion dances before break. They will be attending QCC, Quinsigamond Community College Semester 2 for a healthcare information day and an entire tour of QCC's sim labs and their healthcare programs. Their seniors right now will be starting their acute care rotation at Harrington Hospital and various internships in a couple of weeks. They are also anticipating a guest speaker, Dr. Michelle B., who will be joining them to discuss her work building and working at a hospital in Niger. In electrical, all their juniors have completed and obtained their OSHA 10-hour card in construction. They will apply this information to carry on the habit of a safe work environment, especially beginning to work on projects in the shop. Machine shop students are continuing unique individual blueprints to bring to life all of their ideas and learning how to properly clean and maintain all the machines in the shop with their different needs and tunings and things like that. In carpentry, they are starting to build a ramp for the Holland Aqua Riders, the ski team there, for which students had to make scale drawings that they worked out required material and a cut list. Their drawing also acts as a build plan, and after that they are planning a shed for the Sturbridge Trail Committee. The shed will also require that the students make these scale drawings and for the same reasons that they did for the ramp as a build plan. In business tech, their students have continued into the next session of the statewide stock market competition. I mentioned last time that their juniors placed, I think, like 5th maybe overall in that first one. So now they're entering with teams from grades 10, 11, and 12 just to get everyone on the same page, kind of in-class competition, getting different grades to go against each other. The seniors are beginning to work closely with the juniors regarding the ins and outs of running the school store, as the juniors will begin to take over marketing from the seniors as fresh faces and begin to put something new out, hopefully. In hospitality and culinary, students have continued serving both staff and the public in our Cornerstone Cafe. And just before break, we hosted Brookfield Elementary, about 30 staff members, for a luncheon as a holiday gift from Dr. Hosterman. After break, the students have beginning to focus on the Pro Start Challenge at Gillette Stadium. For our seniors, this will be our second year in this event, which is very fun. And as a reminder, Pro Start has students compete cooking, and they have about an hour to prepare an appetizer, an entree, and a dessert off of their own preset menu. Last year we had one culinary team go. This year we have 2 culinary teams of 5 students, 1 student in cake decorating, and an entire 5-student hospitality team. In Skills USA, we have started to shift our focus to prepare competitors for the written exam through the Skills USA framework. We have meetings about once a month for the entire hour. We just do the Skills USA curriculum, has some interactive stuff, some written stuff. Overall, students leave feeling more prepared, especially with a lot of the written things that are on the exam that regard, like, what are the colors, what are the emblem, things that they might not talk about in their shop because they're focused on what their vocation is. That's all I have, so thank you all for your time.
Thank you. Questions for our student representatives? Thank you. Move to budget, Mrs. Noyes Miller.
We have not had a meeting as of yet.
We have a party planned, though.
That's right, so the 28th, the time is still somewhat in flux. Mr. Valenzola, is this?
Yes, by tomorrow, you'll know my flight.
Okay, tomorrow we'll find out what time we're having our meeting on the 28th, and we
It's
also.
posted for 9 to 12.
But we're also hoping to meet with the bylaw chair.
I think that's what was
prior
suggested.
to our meeting.
Let's see
But
what
we
we
don't know the time yet or her availability.
Michelle loves Saturday meeting.
We may try and move up earlier than 9, but 9 will be the latest.
I'm just looking at it, is that a Saturday?
9 will be the latest?
9 will be the latest that we start.
Really?
Okay.
I mean the earliest.
No,
Because we were talking about possibly the afternoon if he's going all night. Remember you mentioned, you suggested.
well, originally I was saying, should we start an hour early?
If I
That's-
don't land until 8:30 in the
Right.
morning, I can't.
Well, that's what we're waiting to find out. Originally, we could bring folks in a half an hour early and ask Michelle to join us at 8:30. But we can have budget without Mr. Valenzola. We can't have
Michelle
that
without
follow-up conversation without Mr. Valenzola and Michelle because,
We'll figure it out.
exactly.
Yeah,
So we're still trying to have that follow-up meeting.
We'll know.
no problem.
Okay.
Technical.
We didn't meet since the last.
Curriculum. Mrs. Barnacle.
Anybody?
Did we have a meeting?
We didn't have.
We knew that.
No.
You got me nervous, I thought
I
you
know. You missed it.
Let's try this again. Bylaw and policy, Mrs. Fitzgerald. You've got something for us.
We did have a meeting.
Yeah.
Bylaw did have a meeting on January 9th. You'll see there's one policy in front of you, but before that, I want to touch on the two other subjects that we spoke about at that meeting. The first was, we were really happy to have, our new athletic director, who's not so new anymore, has been here all year, Marcus Backlund, join us. Being that it's his first year, we thought it was an ideal time to have him take a look at the athletic handbook, which legally are our policies on governing our athletics. We wanna make sure that the handbook, one, is up to date, that in fact we're following the policies as laid out in the handbook, and we really wanted his opinion on what's working, what's not working, and what else he might envision for the department. We talked about his review with his staff of that handbook to make sure that it does meet all of those, check off all those boxes, and the idea is to have it completely reviewed and up to date before the student handbook comes before the full committee in the spring. So that by adopting that, we're adopting those athletic policies as well. So I want to thank him for his time. He was really informative and really gracious, giving us the time that he did. We also spoke briefly as a subcommittee on our policy regarding use of therapy and comfort dogs in the schools. We reviewed that policy this year. It was already presented to you. We simply wanted to make sure that in fact, now that the Sturbridge Police Department has a comfort dog assigned to Officer Colby Taitula, that dog is actively staging at Burgess Elementary, but is used for many functions throughout the town and district. And we foresee a time when the dog could be really valuable at the district schools as well. We wanted to make sure that our current policy allowed for that expectation. It does. We would like at some point when Rocky finishes his training, we think it'd be terrific to have Officer Taitula come up here with Rocky after speaking with our school administrators, and really let the full committee know how that dog can be employed throughout the schools to our benefit. And then finally, in front of you, you see policy JIC. Student, I'll get it right. Student discipline in schools. The change that you see on that policy under suspension was prompted by a change in the law. And this very language in front of you was that recommended by our attorneys. So, in the opinion of our attorneys, it meets the letter of the law, and MASC hasn't gotten around itself yet to changing its recommended policy, but I'll take our lawyer's opinion over MASC's any day. So we're recommending that we adopt that recommended language that you see in front of you in bold language. You'll see what it does is specify more specifically the actions that our school personnel must take before suspending a student and the use of alternative remedies to suspension. And so we request that this be adopted on first reading.
Bringing that to the floor, does it require a second? It's a recommendation of the bylaw and policy committee. Is there discussion?
I just make a comment, and actually we'll check off an item under my superintendent's report. I do think you should vote exactly as is. That is the law as it stands today. I will say MASC hasn't gotten around to change because they are desperately hoping that they can get an amendment through legislation to slightly change things. We did have, we being the entire leadership team, all principals and assistant principals and myself had a Zoom session with our legal counsel last week to review what we can do, what we can't do, how we're supposed to process. And we are not the only ones. Across the state, there are some frustrations, some concerns, principals feeling that this ties hands a little bit more. We completely get where it comes from. We completely get, as I have said to my principals and to the leadership team, in what world has punishment ever been to not educate? That is not what we want to be about, but there are some things that the principals are concerned that they feel are egregious enough and they're concerned, and I think that's across the state. So MASC is actually trying to get some small amendments. There's a little bit of language through and trying to find legislators to submit those amendments. That process ends on Friday, so whether they'll be successful or not, I'm not sure, but I think that's what the holdup is from MASC's point of view.
I didn't mean as a slight.
No, you're right though, but it prompted me, yes, it's a challenge, and we get it, and what it has brought up is the clear conflict between the mental health challenges we're having and the disciplinary issues and being able to provide appropriate education in sometimes inappropriate behavior. So this comes from a mental health point of view, and I 100% support it, but there's a few areas that the principals across the state are just struggling with and feeling like that there's sometimes a conflict between the mental health suspension policy and the bullying policy, for example. So you may hear more on that. There's been a lot of talk. I think that this is not gonna change much of it changes at all.
Further discussion? Any objection to the motion? By unanimous consent, so approved on first reading.
That's all I have.
Thank you, Mrs. Fitzgerald. Brings us to negotiations, Mrs. Randall.
No meeting, no report.
And building physical plant, I don't think Mrs. Lee is.
No, but we did have a meeting, Ms. Leo could not make it, we had a meeting just before this meeting, so, I'll be happy to just update that we did have a quorum that did vote, we presented the fiscal '24 capital plan, and that will go to budget in another week and a half or so, but the committee did vote to support the fiscal '24 as presented. Their support being the items, understanding, knowing the things that we'd like to do and should do. The funding of them is still yet to be discussed.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Boyd. Brings us to communications, which there are none in your packet, and superintendent's report.
Okay, you just got one. Well, that's kind of coupled with, again, as I mentioned, the legislative, the process for filing bills ends Friday, which it has been noted is a little interested that there's a number that from a school perspective, they're trying to get submitted and have sponsors for, with the process ending Friday, but yet the entire process and legislative process this year is going to be delayed. We do not expect a budget until the first week of March, so it's going to be a challenge. It's gonna be hard to get numbers out to our 5 towns who wanna start looking at where they're at when we can't even begin to put out. We can talk with budget subcommittee about our budget needs, but we can't talk about what that looks like from an assessment point of view until we get the state numbers, so it's gonna be a bit uncomfortable. Another piece of legislation that MASC is trying to push through or get, I think they have got support to at least submit it, is an increase in circuit breaker funding from 75% to 90%, and that is a direct response to that 14% increase in private tuition. So that is moving, and we'll see where it goes. Other than that, last Friday, as Jake eloquently mentioned, we had our professional development. It was almost as good as the full day in October. Weather was just a little better in October, but we worked around it. It was okay. We had both sides of the street filled with a lot of good sessions. Jake has now mentioned a couple of times the student presentation, Peer Connections Group. I will dangle that to you all and say, I'm pretty sure I put Jake on notice that I am hoping to have them present at your retreat. So that's my next agenda item to remind you, March 25th is when we will retreat. I know there's a lot going on. Mike and I have talked a little bit, maybe of, if we can contain this one to end by noon instead of being into the afternoon, that seems to be what folks might appreciate. It's hard to get you out on Saturdays. I get that, never mind almost the full day. So the 25th, we're still working on the agenda, but I will let you know I am hoping to have students present to you that exact presentation that they did for professional development for staff. And Mr. Sturgis and I are talking about a student or two we'd love to have you meet also from the junior high. And that is it.
Thank you, Mrs. Boyd. Any questions for Mrs. Boyd? Brings us to public access. Open forum. All right, and the executive session was placed on here, but I don't see the interested parties in attendance, so we will not need to convene into executive session, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Made by Mrs. Panic, seconded by Daddy? All those in favor will say aye. With all the ways you get me all the time, I'm gonna be upset.
Remember that song, you only just be